the record button?
Yeah, we're off and running.
You're off and running. So this is when I should probably say to those of you that don't know me, I'm Jenny Millen, your host for the day, because I always forget to say these things, so I should say it. But yeah, welcome to 2021's first open cafe. So how this differs from other cafes is it's literally a facilitating session that you guys can talk, moan, chat, bitch, whatever you want to do just now about rural mobility. Last month we had the guys from the Mamba and Smarter European projects, and you're actually going to get 2 bites at the cherry. You're going to hear briefly from Simon Young in a minute, and you're also going to hear much more from Simon Young next month at the cafe, because Fortytwo, who are one of our partners, are going to be filling you in on the work that they've been doing in the rural area. So today, please do unmute yourself. It says mute, but unmute yourself. We're recording it because some people can't manage and they've said they're looking forward to the YouTube version. I don't think we need to use the chat box because there's enough of us here. But cake, this is what happened in my household. At the top, we made carrot cake yesterday, but it sort of got a bit demolished. So there's not any left. So Rachel, can I have your token cake, please? Where's your cake?
It's here. You can have it. It was my birthday earlier in the week, so I have a house full of things that I've sworn off eating for Lent. But I thought for you, I would make an exception.
Oh, thank you, love. What is it? Is it a carrot cake one as well? What is it?
This one is toffee, but they were a mixed selection. One of them was shaped like the Cookie Monster, so it had big white eyes, the icing was blue, and it had half cookie in its mouth.
I'm sending you a birthday hug.
Honestly, I didn't need to eat anything else all day. I was totally wired. But it was, you know, they've been really nice, so it's good.
You'll get that birthday hug when I see you eventually, in whatever decade that's going to be.
I was going to say, God knows how many birthdays I'll have had by then, but...
Some of us might be well truly older. Anybody else got cake? I've got shortbread now, and I discovered I had this plate from when my son was born. I thought, oh, that's quite pretty. Anybody else got cake? Because it is important. Put it up if you've got it.
So I haven't quite got cake, but it's my daughter's 17th birthday today, and she's got this cake at home now. So that's what you call a cake.
That is what you call a cake. And I think, Greg, you need to take a picture of it and send it to us for next time.
Yeah, will do.
June, have you got anything there?
I've eaten mine, I'm afraid. I had it earlier. Sorry.
Keith, you probably don't have anything there, but I know Rennie has just joined, and Rennie is always the queen of bread making or cake. So Rennie, come on, what is the cake method for today?
I'm afraid I've got nothing. I'm late because I got a bit carried away making my chai. The only thing I've got is I've got a bun in the oven. Does that count?
Is it genuinely in the oven, or is that a phrase for something else?
No, I'm pregnant.
You are you?
Yes.
Congratulations. Fantastic.
5 weeks to go tomorrow before I go on leave. So
you get that one under wraps.
Hmm?
You kept that one under wraps.
Well, it's quite easy when you're only on screen from here downwards, generally.
Andrew, have you got any cake, coffee with you?
No, I just rushed to finish something else, and what I might do is sneak off with my video closed. And
you are. It's about cake and coffee. I've always been known as the cake lady for decades. So
I just ate some hot cross buns earlier, though, so I can go and grab one.
That sounds very good, very appropriate. So you see, folks, this is what we're all about: cake, coffee, and informal. It's not your usual get together online, is it? So for those of you there's 3 or 4 of you that haven't been to a cafe before, what we're all about, I founded this back in 2018. We ran a convention in 18 and 19 and online in 2020, obviously. And last year, before the COVID pandemic hit, Alex and I were already working out that people traveling distances for rural meetings, etc., was A, expensive, and B, time consuming. So how could we put things online? So we were starting to do that before a pandemic hit. Then a pandemic hit, and the cafes have grown arms and legs, as many of you know, and we've got not just a Scottish audience, but international. So I'm waiting for Israel to come in and Japan to come in shortly. But what's SRITC about? As you're seeing, sharing and supporting. We're also full of very useful information between us all. We're hopefully an inspiring bunch of people, and we're all about working together. But most importantly, we're a community of lots of different people, I try and describe us as a bottom-up approach to rural mobility. So we've got communities, and we've got policymakers, and we've got tech companies, we've got everybody here around the coffee and cake to have a chat. So, as I say, this is your cafe, it's not my cafe. I have a habit of chatting lots, so it's going to be me facilitating you guys chatting and bringing up whatever's on your mind for today. So I'm going to stop sharing, because the person I'm going to throw to, and those of you that are new, I have a habit of doing this, I pick on people. But this one knows I'm picking on him today, is Simon, because as you'll have seen in some of the emails, Simon and his crew have been doing some really interesting work with converting a bus for COVID. So I thought I'd get him to share a bit about it, because I found it quite inspirational. So Simon, the floor is yours, and I'm hoping Alex has made you co-host.
Okay. Morning, everyone. So I'm Simon Young from Fortytwo. So I look after Insight in our little company. We're a solutions design agency based in Oxfordshire. And we work very closely with local authorities around the country, and particularly Oxfordshire County Council, of course, who are on our doorstep, and with their innovation hub, iHub team, who do some pretty amazing things. But we also work with Cambridgeshire, Yorkshire, Lincolnshire, Somerset, I think, various places. And we are currently working on a project with the Department for Transport on rural transport, so looking into what some of the issues are and what kind of funding needs to be put in place for to solve some of those. But today I'm going to talk about the bus, so the vaccine bus. It's called Project Move. I'll just share my screen so you get a sense of what it looks like. Just bear with me a sec. Here we go. So we've got a website, projectmove.co.uk. Now, the idea came up that with the requirement to get mass vaccinations, or particularly mass testing, let's say testing is the main focus, rather than getting lots and lots of people to move to a central location, why not take those tests to that location? So think schools, think hospitals where you don't need to have people actually going into the building, think businesses where you've got large numbers of people working who will need to be tested for COVID. And we thought, well, there's lots of buses off the roads at the moment because nobody's using public transport. So why don't we convert a bus into being a mobile clinical centre? And so we're lucky enough to have a low carbon engineer working in our company as an award-winning low carbon engineer, Sally Pawlowski, who has done just amazing things around electric vehicles, around she's looking into hydrogen conversions, all sorts of stuff. And we thought, well, let's see how we can take a standard bus and for a minimal amount of money, take out some of the seats and put in some booths or sections, and use it then as a mobile testing facility. And it doesn't just have to be testing, it could be after the pandemic, it could be used for, vaccinations, it could be used for taking all sorts of community health services to the communities, and particularly in those places where people have to travel distances to go and get some of these things on a regular basis. So the bus that we took, we were lent it by the Oxford Bus Company. Now we had quite a few requirements in terms of making sure that we didn't contravene its licensed purpose as being a bus. I believe it takes about £600 to change its status from being a passenger transport vehicle into being some other use. And then you have to, of course, have it revalidated afterwards, so to make sure it has all of the appropriate requirements if you want to convert it back into being a bus. So in order to avoid some of that, because we didn't know initially how long we'd have the bus for, we've designed it in such a way that it doesn't lose its status as being a passenger bus, even though we're using it for this other purpose at the moment. So what we did with the bus was to convert it, as I say. I'm going to show you a video that is actually, I believe the video is on the website somewhere.
I haven't seen this. I've seen a picture of it and I've shared the picture, but I haven't seen the video.
But I'm going to show you the video. I've actually downloaded it onto my PC because I thought it'd be easier and probably better for bandwidth to do it that way rather than me collecting it from somewhere else and then sending it on to you. So I'm just going to play this this video if I can find the darn thing. Where's the button? There we go.
While you were doing that, I was busy trying to press the chat button on your screen and then realised it was your screen, not my screen. It's Friday for me, isn't it?
So can you see this? Can you see the bus? Yep. There's some cheesy music playing in the background, which I'm hoping you can't hear. So I'm just going to talk over it. So at the front, you've got the wheelchair accessible area. So we had to leave certain widths of the compartment there, so you could still get a wheelchair in to be able to turn it around. But because there's a ramp at the front of the bus, of course, that means people can easily get on there if they have accessibility problems. In the central doors, we have 2 additional pods separated again by a screen. So we've got pod 3 there and pod 2 next to it. The people we were talking to said it's unlikely they'd actually use the curtains to close off because it's so quick to actually do the test. And obviously it would sort of slow throughput if you keep having to open and close the curtains. At the back of the bus, so you see how we're taking out quite a few of the seats anyway, but at the back of the bus we have kind of the crew area. And this is where we have a medical grade fridge there on the left. And then we have lockers for storing the various pieces of equipment that people need. And there's also a crew rest area there with a table. If you were having people coming from, from a school or whatever to come and have their test, they'd have to wait outside for the 15 minutes for the lateral flow test. But that's not a big issue. We could also put up a gazebo or something like that next to it. And then the other thing about it was a generator, so an external generator that's just the diesel-driven one that's at the back, or petrol-driven one rather, and that powers all of the different elements to keep it going through the day. Now we've had some success so far in taking this on a sort of a road show, let's say. We've taken it to Abingdon School and used it there for a day. And that was used by members of staff and various others. And we got some news coverage about it. There was also, we took it to Milton Keynes and got further coverage there. We've got, as some of our partners, we've got, let me just go back to the partner people here. So Pharmacy Thames Valley, they have, I think it's 30 different outlets across the Thames Valley region. So basically a bus like this could go to one of those locations and provide testing for people in that particular environment, so particularly if that was in a village. And we've also had a day of testing it outside the John Radcliffe Hospital in Oxford as well. Again, to be able to do tests so that people don't go into the hospital with their tests, they're actually able to keep that nice and clear for more urgent cases. So that's kind of where we're at the moment. It's only a prototype. We're looking at potentially doing vans next, because we think that vans would be a bit more rapid in terms of being able to move them around, because you don't need a qualified driver and all that kind of thing. And also less expensive, of course, because I think it's about £260 a day for a driver for a coach. And you need them to be able to move it from place to place due to the licensing restrictions. But anyway, just thought I'd share that with you. There are other organisations doing similar things, but from what I've seen, none of them have actually gone the kind of the medical route so much. They've tended to just take a bus, literally, and just have people going in and out without any regard for the potential hygiene elements, or having some of the aspects that we had there, like the medical fridge and the lockers and all those sorts of things. One last thing I'll say is, before we could even do any work on this, we had to deep clean the thing, and my goodness was it dirty. You would not believe how dirty these buses are. And particularly when you start taking out some of the plastic fittings around the sides, the sort of the skirting, the moulding at the edges of the seats, We found broken glass from when they'd had obviously a broken window many years ago. I mean, it just hadn't been cleaned. So you really don't want to be using something that hasn't been cleaned in a medical environment.
Thank
So
you.
anyway, just thought I'd share that.
Yeah, thank you. I know traditionally in the open cafes, we haven't had any sort of PowerPoint presentation things, but I thought that might be really inspiring for some people here, and you can contribute to it. When Simon told me about it, I was like, could you send one to my mum and dad? Because they've been shielded since March last year, and they can't go into the hospital and they need their vaccinations. And I was just like, could you imagine just be able to go up and down some streets to be able to do this, and people can sit and wait 15 minutes in their own room or their own house rather than having to drive. Anyway, I felt rather inspired by it, so I hijacked the cafe to get Simon to share that with me. So I'm going to open the floor and let people talk, but I have a feeling I've got Alan who's joined me from SRN. So I don't know, Alan, if this ties in with some of the bits and pieces that you've been doing. If you want to introduce yourself and say what you've been up to. You've muted yourself. You've muted yourself.
Okay.
There you go.
Not used to using Zoom in Scottish Government systems.
Good to see you, by the way. I haven't seen you for a
thank
while.
you. And you, Jenny. Sorry, yeah, we've been a bit of touch really, just because we've been purely in COVID-19 response recovery work.
Do you want to explain SRN and what you do?
Sure, yeah. For those that don't know, I manage the Network Support Unit, which delivers the Scottish Rural Network, which is funded under EU scheme, under the CAP Pillar 2 scheme. So obviously, with Brexit, the gift that keeps on giving, that funding has ceased. So we're dealing with all the other schemes in Pillar 2, putting our case towards continuation of funding from Scottish Government funds to our CAPSEC, and we've had the positive news that we will get continued funding going forward for the next financial year.
Alan, your audio is a bit muffled. I don't know if it's just mine, but you're a bit muffled.
Any better?
No.
Okay. Try it out the earphones. Any clearer?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Everybody's nodding. Yes.
Okay. Right. I don't know how much of you caught that, but basically, yeah, the Scottish Rural Network, funded through EU. We've got our funding secure for the next financial year, so which is good news. We're currently working at a much reduced headcount. We had a kind of a heyday. We had about 7 or 8 staff. We're down to 3 staff, and that's really been driven by COVID. A couple of team members have been moved to other areas of government policy area, including Islands team, to help with work there. And so with our new funding kind of confirmed, our priority will be to recruit a couple of staff members to get us back up to strength. So basically what our function normally would be is to facilitate engagement with rural communities, rural stakeholders, to support the rural development programme, the various schemes that are within that, so running workshops, conferences, etc. COVID obviously has put a serious dent in that in the last year, and so we're moving to sort of virtual online workshops, and we're going to be, we've got 4 that we're in the sort of progressing through procurement stage at the moment. One around community-led local development, one around rural and islands community innovation and addressing climate change, one around rural democracy and the rural movement, and another around agri-tourism and the opportunities that this staycation market will present to that market. And we also have the Scottish Rural Parliament coming up in March, which is going to be the first virtual Scottish Rural Parliament, which for those of you who are unfamiliar with the Rural Parliament, that's held once every 2 years. Obviously, it's been a physical event. The last one was in Stranraer, and it's one of the largest kind of bringing together of rural communities, island communities, in a kind of in a forum where we can discuss priorities, their needs, their aspirations, how we can influence policy direction in the Scottish Government. And
At this point, I should interject, Alan, and say nobody knows this, and you're stealing my thunder. But SRITC are going to be at the rural parliament, so I will come back to that at the end.
excellent, excellent. And apologies for that, Jenny.
It's all right.
So yeah, that's our kind of role. That's where we're at the moment. So yeah, fairly positive in terms of going forward. Obviously, we're in Scottish Government funding world now, so it's yearly funding cycle as opposed to EU, where you had the luxury or the logic of 6-7 year programs to be able to develop things. The yearly cycle means that there will be issues. I'm sure that will, especially with schemes that are around climate mitigation, where you've not seen the benefits of those things to a couple of years down the line, and even LEADER. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with LEADER schemes. Again, those kind of projects can take a couple of years to come to fruition. So yeah, so some tough conversations probably ahead, but positive in that we have that funding going forward.
And you'd love a COVID bus like Simon's got, wouldn't you?
Obviously, goes without saying.
I'm going to ask Rachel if she knows of anything similar happening, and what's going on, because you need to introduce yourself as well, because not everybody knows you.
Of course. So I forgot everything about myself there. It's very much Friday for me as well. So I'm Rachel Murphy, and I'm Director for Scotland with the Community Transport Association. And I do know of a medical bus, but further afield. When I lived in Madrid, the way people give blood in Spain is to get onto a coach that's set up as a medical vehicle. And they just move them around kind of major population centres, and that works incredibly well. And it also means if somebody gets a wee bit faint, they can just drive them directly to the hospital. So that works very well. So I can definitely see like a lot of space, and I think particularly in rural areas. There are a couple of CT kind of non-emergency specifically created ambulances that I know are doing stuff at the moment, particularly actually in Aberdeenshire. So I'm kind of thinking, Jenny, you may also know them. They do some really exciting stuff. So I think we'll see probably more of that. I mean, obviously transport to health more generally is such a big part of what CT does, and we're really seeing it with vaccines at the moment for the double effect of it's the right thing to do, but also we're really keen to get services back up and running. But if I can mini take over presenting for a moment, we actually have a member with us on the call who's doing some very exciting transport to health stuff. Thurston, I'm looking at you. Do you want to jump in?
I was going to
knew that was coming.
Do you see that beautiful segue? They should have me on Radio 1.
Yeah, Thurston and I had already worked this one out, so you've just hijacked me on that one.
I'm sorry.
It's allowed.
One of those days, everyone's stealing your thunder, Jenny, sorry. Yeah, so thank you very much, Rachel. Appreciate that. So as per the lovely introduction, I am Thurston. I'm working in the Scottish Borders. I work with a community transport organisation called Berwickshire Wheels. We do transport for older, vulnerable people, but more or less it's open to anyone. But as kind of Rachel's saying, it's a lot of transport to health that we typically do. As an aside to that, the new project I'm working on, although I say new, it's been going since October last year, funded till October this year, is called What Really Matters, emphasising the whiz and the what really matters every time. And it's aiming to work with the local communities in the Scottish Borders to figure out what their issues with rural transport are and help make viable solutions to that. So far, we've identified e-bikes as being something everyone's really interested in launching. So I am currently stitching together a disparate groups of communities all over the borders who are developing it. So some have bikes that they're trying to figure out what to do, some are trying to figure out how to get bikes, and others are trying to figure out how they can make paths to go between the different villages and towns. So generally there's not a thing yet to get everyone on the same platform. So that's one thing I'm trying to do. Others is talking about ride sharing, car sharing, putting vehicles onto the open market, and then getting people into obviously vaccinations, hospitals, GPs, whatever it is. Completely separate project that I'm not working on, but is related to my vehicles, is one of my colleagues is looking to adapt it to be a roaming information hub, which will have people from the NHS on it who can give advice to vulnerable people in the community who couldn't otherwise get out. So that's something we're working on at the moment. So yeah.
Thurston, I know you're going to talk, we talked about hitchhiking in one of the cafes, which was really popular, and I'll come back to you on that one. But on the information hub, wearing my PhD hat, there's something called Social Services on Wheels that took place in Bangladesh from 2014 to 2018. And it's really interesting how in developing countries, they're actually doing this and have been doing this for many, 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 many years. It's quite often it's red tape that prevents us from doing that in the UK or Europe or more developed countries. So I can send you that if you want, because it's quite interesting how they've combined everything. But do you want to just explain to others what caught your imagination about the hitchhiking session that we had?
Yeah, absolutely. So when I was talking to Jenny at one of the other cafes pre-Christmas, or no, that wasn't even the cafe, was it? I can't even remember. No, that was
from a cafe, I think. And some of you were there, and if you weren't there, we managed to get a piece in the Scotsman as well, so that was even better.
So yeah, so it was kind of inspired by, is it Réseaucus down in South France that do sort of semi-organized hitchhiking? So essentially that was kind of triggered my mind to say, we are looking at trying to promote more tourism and more accessibility, in particular for younger people, because rural migration for younger people is atrocious. As soon as you hit 18, 19, there's nothing for you in rural locations. You just want to go into the city. As a way of trying to encourage employability and access to other forms of transport, hitchhiking's come up. And because we provide a community transport service, already going locations, the theory behind being able to jump the vehicles we currently operate into a hitchhiking mode isn't massive, but as a side to that as well, in the work we're doing, sort of supporting volunteers to be registered safely to ensure that the vehicles are licensed, that's something we can do back office support as a community organization to other people looking to do that as well. So it kind of joins everything together nicely.
It does, and I'm really quite enthusiastic. Whether we call it hitchhiking, as Alistair Kirkbride said, we rebrand it as something else. I do think this thumbing solution in a secure manner is sort of formalizing some of the informal that's already taking place. I know we've got Azrael here from Japan, who's busy eating something at the moment. He's allowed to do that because of the time difference, but I'll come back to him in a minute. But we do have Greg, Kevin and Matt, who are all in sort of responsive, flexible transport side of things. So I'm going to throw the floor open to these guys because they're not doing hitchhiking at the moment, but I would be interesting to see how they sort of think that model within rural and the work that they're doing within rural could come together. So one of you go for it.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I mean, I grew up in a very rural...
yourself, Greg. Introduce yourself.
Sorry, yeah. My name is Greg Gormley. I'm the CEO of Scoot. I created Scoot because my daughter passed her driving test and went out one night and didn't come home. And it sounds dramatic, but what transpires she had been doing was she had just been driving her mates around all night and got in at 5 a.m. And she said, look, that the good thing is, Dad, I earned 65 quid. And I was like, okay, that's brilliant. I said, is that legal? She's like, I don't know, classic young person. If they don't know, it doesn't matter. So I was looking at this whole thing, and you know, there's BlaBlaCar, which is sort of digital hitchhiking, which started in France back in 2006. And I said, look, you know, how do you move around as young adults? Because it is a big problem. You know, we know that 120 million bus miles have been taken out of service in the past decade, etc. And it's like, she said, well, what we do at the moment is we push it out on Snapchat. And I said, well, what do you push out? He said, well, I need a lift, or I'm giving lifts. And I said, well, how many friends have you got on Snapchat? He said, I've got 1,200. I said, well, you don't know 1,200 people and you're pushing out to 1,200 people. So I sort of looked at it and thought, there must be a better way to do this. And I'm a bit of a fan of Uber, not the brand, because I think it's a bit sort of out there, but I love the product. And Uber started in June 2010, 6 town cars in San Francisco, and then changed a whole movement across the globe within a period of about 4 years. And yet we know that lift sharing is something that's good for the planet. It reduces congestion, it's cheaper mode of travel, you know, reduces carbon, etc. But there's this awkward human element that we fail on. And it's like, if I share a lift with someone, do I have to pay them? How much do I have to pay? How do I pay them? Oh, you've forgotten to pay me, and all these awkward human conversations. So basically I thought, look, wouldn't it be amazing if we could create Scoot, which only connects up friends initially, where they could even drive for one another through an app where they can order one another like a taxi. It calculates the payment within the app, so it knows how many miles is driven, and it takes payment through PayPal and payment card or Apple Pay. And at the end of the journey, it just takes payment and away they go. And they can either go on a shared journey together, so the cost is shared, or as a passenger, you can direct where your travel is. So you're almost sort of driving your friend as a favor. And Scoot's been created, during pandemic, which was a bit of an issue. So we pivoted slightly and applied to Innovate UK for a competition, which we won, which was great. So we've added in errands, and what errands was where you can actually ask for someone to go and pick up your click and collect shopping. You may be having to self-isolate or be vulnerable, and you can push the request out to 10 friends at once. So you're not sort of pinpointing a friend. And the first friend that says, oh yeah, I'll do that, it'll navigate them to where they need to go, what they need to pick up, and then navigate them where they need to drop it off. So the errand might not necessarily be for me. My parents live 100 miles from me, but I've got friends still from my hometown. So I could actually organize an errand for my parents in the app. And then I can ask for it for free, or I can tip a friend £5. So we started this whole sort of movement about connecting friends together. And then I want to see how we can almost work like LinkedIn. So you can say, I don't mind having a friend of a friend pick me up, or even, I'm really desperate, I need a friend of a friend of a friend. And we're looking at how in rural communities, we can almost push it out like a notice board. So rather than just knowing the people, saying, right, is there someone in my community within a 3-mile geographic location that can give me a lift tomorrow at 10 o'clock? And you can just push that out and then identify everyone in that location, and then it'll put the request through. So we've got this idea eventually to almost create a foundation whereby we could have an iPad in a community hall where people could actually go and get help and assistance, because not everyone has a smartphone, and arrange to be picked up by someone else over the coming days. And it's just about how you can connect people together. And the nice thing about it is when you register to be a driver, you put your registration number in, we do a check with DVLA for tax and MOT, but we also pull through the CO2 rating. So we actually plant trees roughly every 3 journeys. So we're actually carbon negative. So the more journeys we do on the Scoot platform, the better it is for the planet. So we're trying to get this whole movement being pushed. And then we do an audit every quarter.
You're inspiring a lot of people. I can see the heads going here and the brains going here and the smiles going here. It's music to my ears, because as many people know, the good side of things and delivery to side of things has always been a passion of mine, that it needs to be brought together. Because I think a lot of the time we think about getting people to places rather than necessarily bringing services together. Alan's busy clapping away. I'm going to come back to you, Greg, but I'm going to go to Azrael in Japan, and I'm going to steal his thunder, saying everybody's stealing my thunder today. Get your head around this. Azrael, how many people have you seen today?
So just before that, I just want to make a question.
No. Tell them how many people you've seen today.
So the organizer told me that this year, because Corona, we only have very few people, so we only have 1,800 attendees, physical attendees.
I'm looking at everybody's eyes. Yes, he's seen 1,800 people today. That's blown your mind for the day, hasn't it? Yes, June, lift the jaw back up. Right, Azrael, I'll let you keep going.
Yeah, sorry. So I just want to make the question, and you say someone else was going to present. I just wanted to ask Greg, when you say 2006 friends, are you talking about BlaBlaCar?
So BlaBlaCar was formed in 2006, but it works. It's more digital hitchhiking and operates through Facebook. We're more about connecting friends and communities together.
I just want to know which, you say something about a French company in 2006, so I just want to know which one was.
Yeah, BlaBlaCar was
okay.
Created.
Yeah. Azrael used to work with BlaBlaCar.
Ah, right.
I know. Yeah, I also know that in the UK there's a lift share.
Lift share and Go Car Share. I mean, this whole movement is growing. I mean, you've got Google, who owns Waze, and Waze Carpool has launched and is in Israel, Mexico, Brazil, and US.
Okay, so Ginny, I let the other speaker go, and then I will come back to me, okay?
No, keep going, Azrael. You're all right. Keep going.
Okay, anyway, so, okay, first of all, I want to say that I fulfill my personal promise, because I have been trying to join this cafe this year, and this is the first time. So first of all, Happy New Year to everyone, and Happy New Year of the ox or the cow. I don't know how do you call it. And I'm super tired. It was a super long day. These days I've been busy because this year I just started a new job on rural mobility. Yay. Well, not rural mobility, but mostly rural mobility. And the largest provider of on-demand services in Japan, mostly for rural areas. So it's crazy. And I'm the first foreigner. I have the longest hair. So, you know, a great power comes with a great responsibility. So I'm super happy to join this cafe today. And I also would like to congratulate Jeannie, because I have the feeling that every time I join, I just found new faces. So it's hard to see two faces at the same time. So that's it. For those who doesn't know me, I'm in Israel. Nice to meet you. I'm in Japan. And as I said, I just started a new job in MidAsia, which is the largest provider of demand mobilities. And that's the boring part. The funny part is that I have one of the longest careers in the mobility environment, I would say. And I'm super happy to be here to tell you about.
And he's 1,800 people. That's the bit that I can't get my head around. It's 1,800 people. Anyway, thank you for coming along, Angel. He's also got the joys of being involved in the International Transport Forum working group on the periphery, and he's very lucky he's escaped not having to chair any group or write any report, unlike me, which is what I've got to do on rural mass and shared mobility. Anyway, does Kevin or Matt want to come in on this theme that we're talking about at the moment? Silence.
I'll jump in, maybe go at it from a slightly different angle. Yeah, one of the things I think is really interesting about this topic is the way in which data kind of like integrates into everything. So, you know, at the moment, we're talking a lot about kind of like siloed projects and about how those kind of get some traction, get involved, and the human elements to it. But I also think it's really interesting to kind of take those modes, whether that's, you know, what Thurston was talking about in terms of doing not necessarily medical emergency transportation, but like key medical transportation, or whether it's what Greg was talking about, where it's friends effectively doing necessary kind of journeys for each other. Because one of the things that I'm quite passionate and keen on is the fact that if there are services like that where people are going to medical appointments or are getting sort of deliveries for things that are you know, necessities, is that's also a more general, you know, public obligation. So I think that there is a place for data within all of this, in that without sort of, you know, the appropriate like data tracking or being able to look at it, some of that like insight is potentially lost, because seeing as it's such a grassroots kind of idea and a grassroots sort of like function, it doesn't necessarily pop up on people's radars as much. So I thought that was an interesting part of it.
I have to say, you're doing very well. It's seamlessly taking my next theme, which I said we would talk about, which was data. I mean, I couldn't plan this anymore. Last cafe, we ended up spending quite a lot of time at the end about data. And it was like, well, we need to cut it short now. We'll talk about it at the cafe just now. So Matt, thanks. Seamless. Fantastic. I'm opening the floor so I don't have to speak. Who wants to unmute themselves and contribute? Go for it, Alan.
I'm just really interested in the model that Craig was describing. My first job in Scottish Government was working in disclosure, and part of that disclosure process is any taxi driver who's got a school run, for example, or has got jobs with vulnerable adults, has to have a disclosure done. And I'm just wondering, you know, such a community-driven thing with young people and potentially young vulnerable adults. How do you police that? How do you ensure safety?
Sure. I mean, so what we've started with is we only connect friends together to start with. So in other words, what that means is you have to have their mobile number in your handset and vice versa. So there's no one else that can jump into the journey or ask for a ride from other parts of the community. In terms of pushing out to communities, that's where we'll be working with more of the local governments and talking to them about what protection is there, what checks need to be done. I mean, to become a driver, you have to scan in your driving license. We're looking at doing a phase 2 where you actually talk into the handset and verify the license. We do a check with DVLA. We're talking to the MIB, the Motor Insurance Bureau, about doing insurance checks. And we're also talking to DVLA about actually having not only a check on the license, but just checking if they're disqualified or how many points they have. And it's just about making sure that there is as much safety and security as possible that we can do our end. And then it'll be working with sort of local councils, governments, just talking about if there is, in fact, there was a call for me to speak to the CTA, because it's about how you know, passengers and drivers can be protected. And it's something that I want to sort of open to the floor and just ask and receive more advice from, because I think what we're trying to achieve of pushing out not only lifts, but errands for communities is a really positive thing, but it is about how we put that piece of protection around it. Because, I mean, we've seen so many people scammed through the pandemic, which is just shocking and disgraceful. And that's certainly that, you know, I wouldn't want to feel responsible that we'd created an ability for people to rip people off, which would be horrendous. I mean, there is sort of internal back-end checks that we can do, so we can make sure that people have actually driven that distance with GPS locations. We can tell when handsets have traveled together, so someone could turn around and say, oh, they forgot to pick me up, and oh no, I did pick them up, and we can actually tell if they were together, etc. So there is a certain level we can do, but we'd need some assistance with certainly some checks, things like DBS, etc.
Right, I'm going to do ping to Kate, and then I'm going to pick on Keith, and then I'm going to pick on Ranald. So that's the sequence. So Kate, off you go.
Yeah, I just put in the chat about Scoot. I know in Scotland, when you first passed your test, you're on probation for 2 years. And I just wonder whether that would affect the model. And I know in some other countries, you can't actually have passengers or only one passenger when you've just passed as well. So that might affect it. And can I just jump back to Simon Young while I remember, for your project, another rural issue we've got is people getting postal COVID tests and not being able to return them. And I don't know whether that's, so there's, the Royal Mail have put priority post boxes up, but if you look at the map for Aberdeenshire, it's woeful. You know, there's a half-hour drive to the nearest one for people up at Braemar. And they've been champing away at this for the last 6 weeks, wanting something done. And they end up just putting them in the normal post. And I guess someone has to sort that out. So if your bus model could collect postal tests as well, you know, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's all sorts of things. But I mean, if you think about it, if you had a van, so, you know, much more nimble and able to serve a community, then it could actually be moved around to different areas in its locality on a day and do exactly what you say, you know, so not only test people, but also take any of those postal tests to where they need to go, a priority post box. Yeah, there's very few of them around, as you say.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
as a bus operator, we've worked with a group, and they've decided to buy USB powered water, electrolyzed water to clean.
Oh yes, yeah.
Is that a thing? It sounds strange.
Yeah. So we also have those kinds of the sort of misters with there's a specific, I can't remember what the particular agent is in it, but it's I think within the bus we were looking at having a misting system the whole time that wouldn't interfere with people's breathing or anything, because it's a dry mist as opposed to a wet mist. But there was some reason why we couldn't do that. I can't for the life of me remember what it was, but it was definitely something that we would have incorporated on a regular basis. But one of the aspects of the bus that we're looking at is to also provide not only the kind of the kit for doing the conversion, but also to demonstrate what services need to be put in place, and cleaning the bus on a weekly basis, a deep clean. I don't just mean, you know, going around picking up the bits of paper or whatever, because obviously there isn't any, but a proper saturated deep clean every week would be the way to ensure that at least it remains hygienic.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting, because I just was told about this electrolyzed water, and I thought, oh, is that like homeopathy or something, or is it?
Well, I happen to have a friend who was working for a company that claimed that they could sanitize, I think, like butcher's counters and things with this special electrolyzed water, and it sounds fantastic. And I think in theory it works, but practically it didn't. So it's one of those things that I think there are certain ones that will work and certain ones where it's a little bit dubious.
Hey, Terry's put something in the chat there, and Greg's answered your question in the chat as well. So I'm conscious of time, and I know we'll always keep chatting, but always people have got commitments. Keith, I'm going to draw you into this with your previous role and your new role, how this all fits in and what your thoughts are. And you want to introduce yourself and you unmute yourself. Unmute. Yay.
Okay, I'm there. Okay, right. I'm Keith Stark. I've had I was the manager of Enterprise Car Club and formerly City Car Club for 14 years. So I've set up the car clubs in Edinburgh, Glasgow, Inverness, Stirling, and what have you. But unfortunately, due to the pandemic, I was made redundant by Enterprise. So I'm now working for a company called HireCar, which is the largest peer-to-peer car sharing platform in the UK and longest running. And it just occurs to me that the HireCar is a tech company. It owns no cars and can't own any cars. So we basically facilitate the sharing of individuals' cars. And I think it'd be quite interesting to have a chat with Greg after this, because we're sharing third-party cars, the verification requirements to actually sort of for people to drive cars is very sophisticated. And the other part of it is that we use facial recognition software for people to actually access the vehicles, which I think might be quite an interesting sort of add-on to Scoot. But the whole thing about HireCar being the platform, what we want to try and do is provide the platform for communities to set up their own car clubs. And going on to Thurston, we've actually just taken over running TV electric vehicle car club platform for them. Unfortunately, the lockdown came, so we couldn't actually get up to fit the tech into the vehicles. But as soon as lockdown comes about, so basically, you know, my pitch is just there's far too many cars, and we've got to start sharing them. And going back to my previous role as the manager with Enterprise, a lot of the work that I was doing was with local authorities and managing their fleets. And the HireCar platform would allow the local authorities to share their fleets out of hours with their communities. And certainly up in Highland, where we had about 80 to 85 cars, I think it might be a really, really powerful thing to be able for the local authorities to share their cars with the communities at weekends and in the evenings when people most want them. So.
Yeah, agreed. I think Dundee were looking at, sorry, I'm multitasking homeschooling at the same time here, so sorry for any interruptions. It's the joys of what some of us have got to do. But yeah, I don't disagree with anything you're saying, Keith, and I think a lot of people probably have seen your name on many a document over the years, but haven't seen a face, so now have a face. So welcome to the SRITC community.
Thank you. I'm very interested in trying to become part of the high trans mass platform, but I'm looking for ideas on how to get to the communities to list their cars on the platform to make them available to share. So if anybody's got any ideas on how I can do that, that would be very interesting.
That sounds like another cafe subject that we need to roll on when we're looking at the time. So we'll table that one, Keith. Yep, I promised I would then go to Ranald. Ranald, where are you? I've lost you on my screen. Go for it.
I'm here. Thanks, Jenny. Thanks. No, I thought I'd pick up on a couple of links actually I sent through in the chat there, but also one of the very valid points that Matt had raised in terms of kind of data and the importance of it. And I was thinking, you know, it's a tricky one here, and it's there obviously need to be much better insights and evidence to kind of help inform policy or investment decisions, provision of services, etc. There are just some questions in terms of, you know, how, or there's certainly questions in terms of how open that data, you know, should be, if you like, particularly in the rural mobility space. But there are clearly a few things that have been kind of withdrawn, you know, Google, Sidewalk Labs, etc., around kind of mobility patterns and tracking those. So it's a really interesting area, and I know from slightly more of a kind of tourism perspective, you know, the First Minister, whichever kind of views you have on things at the moment, she's expressed a need to really kind of listen to the evidence, if you like, or she would listen to the evidence in tourism. Whether you feel that's happened or not, you know, maybe another matter. But the bottom line is evidence-based and kind of tourism isn't that great. The data, the underlying kind of quality of the data isn't really there, particularly at a kind of local level. You know, you hear very high level figures in terms of, you know, a sector worth 11 billion, 12 billion kind of pounds, if you like. But when you start going into kind of more granular level, more local, more regional level, in terms of, you know, how areas or places are being affected, you know, it's the evidence base isn't very good. And say a lot of these figures are kind of based on international passenger surveys and extrapolated kind of data, if you like. So say it's an interesting subject, but maybe then kind of touches on, I don't believe enough money is going into some research and development in this space at the moment. So which touches on another point in terms of R&D in the rural mobility space. You know, is that enough of a focus for us at the moment? I think in the UK and in Scotland, probably for quite a long time, there have been kind of question marks in terms of kind of productivity puzzles and you know, how much we invest in R&D in comparison to some other countries, and our, you know, the amount we invest is relatively low, not just in a kind of, like on a percentage of GDP basis as well. And I think it's, I noticed something from the European Space Agency in terms of an open innovation platform that announced relatively kind of recently, it seems, trying to kind of bring things together slightly. I don't know, you know, enough of the detail yet around that, but trying to kind of create more innovation in this space. And I was just wondering, you know, what efforts are we making in the rural mobility space? You know, are there similar platforms to you know, what ESA have kind of put forward to try and kind of create and bring together and kind of coordinate slightly more innovation and develop more research and insights in rural mobility with funding?
I should have an answer for you, and so would Azrael, and I'm conscious of time.
Yes.
Azrael's suddenly going, oh, what? ITF, part of the remit we've got is about innovation in rural mobility, and that's covering the 68 OECD countries. So in theory, the report that will be coming out in the summer should give you some insight into what's happening, not just in the UK, but on the 67 other countries under innovation. I don't know, Azrael's part of it as well. I don't know if you want to contribute anything on the innovation side. I'm conscious of time, and those of you that haven't said anything, I'm about to pick on you. Okay, it's just to get your feedback and thoughts on today. But Azrael, did I miss anything that the ITF are doing at the moment on innovation?
Sorry, Jenny, if I use it's just, it has been a long day, so I was like coughing to. Yeah, I think the ITF actually today could meet more people, and I will forward them more the spreadsheet so they can contribute. I'm not sure they will, but I actually just, sorry if I hope this is not changing the topic, but I just wanted to just share a thought today. So we got some public authorities, like local governments, coming by accident more than chance. And the thing is that it's something frustrating for me to see somehow that they all have here in Japan many local governments with very limited funding and a lot of issues regarding aging society and lack of public transport funds. They are looking through technology solutions, and this is nothing bad itself, but I really feel they're more pushed by the fear of missing out, and they believe that they should invest in these things because this is going to grow their economy, because these companies will go there, rather than because they actually have some clear policy and they really believe that technology will work. So I think this is also because everything is private here. Even the public local authorities are private, and the government by law requests them to be independently financially sustainable, which is kind of like, well, it's impossible, right? But they request by law. So I guess maybe in the UK and other countries will probably fund, when public transport is public, then this doesn't happen as much as here. But I just want to share that thought regarding innovation.
Thank you, and don't fall asleep yet. You're not allowed to. Thurston, I'm going to you, and then I am going to quickly, I know Rennie's disappeared because she's got another meeting, as has Kate, so I am trying to consciously get towards the past finish. So Thurston, off you go.
Right, I'll just make it quite quick. On the kind of note we were talking about, obviously, like the postal priority with the testing and being able to kind of get that back and forth. The post bus service that used to run in the UK obviously was one that would have taken care of that, but because of legislative issues, carrying freight and passengers at the same time is almost impossible to manage, and it's something I very rarely but very loudly start screaming whenever it comes up. Is in rural concepts, having a small village shop that could be serviced by a small community-owned bus that takes the people from that village into the town while it's in the town, picks up some stuff for the shop, and drives everything back up to the village at once. It combats climate change issues, rural transport. It ticks all of the boxes, but you can't do it because legislation's there. So
my point on you in this is twofold. Put that in the rural mobility consultation that's out there to the DFT now. Anybody and everybody. B, I agree, and it's a bee in a bonnet for me, and I've been bringing this up at very high level. C, I'm going to tell you about the gathering convention that we're going to have this year, and you won't be surprised to hear that that's going to be one of the themes, Thurston, because that is how you can potentially look at making business models in the UK and Europe and elsewhere more financially viable. And finally, I keep barking on about it, the ITF report is going to be bringing together good practices throughout the 68 countries on exactly that, the projects that are happening that are combining goods and services. But please do fill in the rural mobility consultation for the DFT to highlight these points. So with you 100% on that. Really quickly, Mr. Yellowlees, any contributions you wish to give or any thoughts or observations? Unmute, my favorite word, unmute.
Suppose the only bus that you could get was a double decker, what would you do with the upstairs?
Put people on the upstairs and put the goods and the bicycles on the downstairs. And leave a space on the downstairs for accessibility.
If they could get up the stairs.
Yep, an accessible point downstairs.
Right.
Going through my next, Alex Reid, you stayed very quiet today. Unmute.
Yes. I mean, I'll throw in a sort of general point that's kind of bugging me lately, and it's really back to the fact of where I'm from originally, from Arran. And you probably have seen that accessing islands at the moment in lieu of the terrible state of ferries is something that's getting a lot of attention in the Scottish press especially. So I think, not to labour the point too much for the context of today, but I think it's something for those of us whose heart is in the island aspects of rural mobility to think about how on earth do we actually resolve this ongoing issue where lifeline services such as ferries are being so disrupted at the moment and creating so many issues for island businesses as well as residents is a continuing thing. So I think, Jenny, it's something that we have to think about bringing up, again in the various different forums. So it might be the Parliament again, because a lot of island communities have been lobbying the Scottish Parliament to try and get this more focused and a more cohesive strategy for ferries and for the island. So, and
I know we had Cameron and the Islands team and Dawn, who used to work with Alan, and Alan's about to say something, and Dawn's no longer on the Islands team, unfortunately, he's gone elsewhere. We had them at the convention in October. But Alan, what do you want to say on the islands?
Just oddly enough, we had a team meeting this morning, and it was highlighted that the Islands team are meeting with the Calmat community team this morning. So it's very much on their agenda, but also they're having some discussions, early discussions with HitTrans and colleagues about mass investment funding and about a pilot for a demand responsive transport pilot project, which would be across the islands. So there is work being scoped on that at the moment, but I'll just read what it says here. DTR is a form of shared transport where vehicles alter their routes based on particular transport demand rather than using a fixed or timetable. There's potential to enable community transport, private public transport operators in their islands to provide a more efficient, effective and sustainable service to address challenges around timetable integration and lack of transport provision highlighted through the National Island Plan consultations. So he's highlighted there a webinar about the VRT model that to colleagues that would be handy for them to get better understanding. I can share the link to that webinar.
Please
on
do.
the 24th of March. I can share it in the
chat, and I'll put it in an email.
bar.
I'm not going to ignore everybody here, but I'm conscious of time and that everybody's disappearing. So I want to just share the last slides with you. Terry, just give me 2 minutes and I'll let you and Azrael have final words at the end. Date for your diary, and I don't know why I put the 20th, Rachel, why did I write the 20th? It should have said the 30th of September. It's the last day in September. I'm looking at my diary. Is going to be our gathering. We're going to have the aim, my aim is that we will have some in-person aspect to it, but it might be a bit closer to your doorstep than normal, is all I'm going to say at this early stage. But put the 30th, not the 20th, the 30th in your diary, please, for our gathering. And I'm calling it a gathering this year, Alan, instead of a convention, because it's a gathering of like-minded people. And I may just have nicked that title from the mountain biking community, because I really like what they do. We didn't even get on to Walk and Talk Club with our podcast because we've run out of time, but we can continue that next month. As I say, Simon and his team are going to speak to you on the 26th of March. We'll be back for an open cafe at the end of April. And then Matt, who you heard earlier on as another of our partners, will be explaining what they've been doing in high trams. And I've barked on enough about the ITF report. You'll get the insights firsthand on the 25th of June. Some other bits and pieces, community announcements just to put to your attention. As Alan's already stolen my thunder, the Scottish Rural Parliament is for transport anyway, is on the 16th of March. They are running a whole load of other different themes that start at the beginning of March. So go and check out, I've given you the SRA link here, I'll put it in an email. Go and check them out, register, because they're covering all sorts of different matters. But SRITC are going to run the transport section. So if you want to be involved in that, help facilitate something, because we're going to run a few workshops, contribute to it, can you please drop me an email or put something in the chat just now as we pull it together. I'm going to shout about it. I had a ta-da moment yesterday. I actually got published for the first time, so that was my ta-da moment. And it's in the conversation, and it's just about rural mobility and COVID, very high level, but an opportunity to get the debate going, which is what it's happened. And I've had random radio places in Edinburgh wanting to speak to me about it. So Alan, let's hope we can keep the momentum going and highlighting this. We've also published our Rural Mobility Strategy Workshop Summary Report, which came from the convention. So this is looking at what would a rural mobility strategy look like in Scotland that some of you contributed to, and how is that placed in a European context, because not many countries, i.e. one, Latvia, have a rural mobility strategy. So it's in your inbox. Please do have a read of it, and please also share it amongst the people that you know, because this is how we make change happen, is sharing that information, just like we're doing just now. So that's a quick dump for you. Who was I? Terry, if you're there, just very quickly, and then Azrael, and then we will head off for lunch.
Just to say thank you for the opportunity. For me, the highlights are, I think there is an issue on disclosure that the community sector has to address. I think there's issues about digital connectivity, and all the best solutions in the world, we can't apply them where I live because of lack of digital connectivity. Dew products I recommend in Dundee as being a very favourable alternative to spraying chemicals where your passengers are going to sit. Road equivalent tariffs, two-edged sword. What we need is for rural and island communities to have a say in the pricing structure of CalMac ferries, because it isn't the case that we just want more and more people to come to the islands, and it isn't the case that we want, it's a way of putting the dampers on camper vans a bit. I think that will do. Oh, and I shall be involved in transport workshops in the context of climate change at the Rural Parliament on behalf of the Scottish Islands Federation.
Fab. And the last one I'm going to go to is Azrael, who's also going to tell you about a conference that's taking place that's 24 hours a day. And I have to say, not all of it, yes, Rachel, not all of it is on the UK time zone, but go for it, Azrael, and unmute yourself.
Yeah, so I think most of you already are aware of, but I would like to restate, I would like to invite you to the Share Mobility Rocks on 3rd and 4th of March in Europe. So the Share Mobility Rocks will be a 24 hours online marathon across different cities, including Brussels, Leeds, Chicago, Melbourne, Tokyo, Phnom Penh, Uganda, and so on. Kampala, sorry, Uganda is not a city. So as for the one in Tokyo, although it's called Tokyo, it will be all about Japan, and we're gonna talk about rural mobility and peri-urban mobility. We're actually not gonna talk about Tokyo. So it's at 5 a.m. UTC, which I guess is 5 a.m. Greenwich time. So it's probably not the best time for you, but I will recommend you that if you are thinking about working that day from 8 p.m., maybe you can just wake up a little bit early and enjoy the conversation with us. Otherwise, I really invite you to join the conversation in other sessions because it's going to be amazing.
Yeah, I think they're going to record some of them, so you'll be able to get access to them. So yeah, he's put the link in the chat, so you can sign up to that. I have to say thank you very much. As always, we can keep talking until the cows come home. Thank you, Simon, for sharing your buses. Really interesting. I think lots of people have got inspired, and I think June's been writing them all down. So I think I might get June to send me her notes from today, so that I have some ideas of my own. So thank you very much. Hopefully see some of you next month, and hopefully catch up with some of you on a walk and a talk, which I seem to be doing quite a lot of. Okay. See you later, guys and girls. Long hair or short hair, doesn't matter. See you later.
Thank you, Jenny.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jenny. Bye, everyone.
Thanks, Jenny.
Night.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye. Alex, you can stop the recording.